Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a 5-month review on this Primary Arms PLX Compact 1 to 8 by 24. Okay, this is a first focal plane scope. This is a $1,500 scope. Okay, so with the mount I think was like $100, and it's mounted on a Ruger MPR. Okay, this is a half MOA rifle, right? So on several occasions I've gotten a half-inch at 100 yards. And this is a pretty good setup because this rifle allows me to make good use of this scope. So a lot of times when I'm buying red dots, it's kind of like, okay, I'll buy the rifle, and then I'm thinking, okay, what type of a dot do I want to put on top of it to really fully utilize, the rifle? Well, with scopes like this, right, with variable scopes, for me it's kind of the reverse. I kind of first, I first buy or select the scope that I want to get, and then I think in terms of what rifle do I want to put underneath it to fully utilize the scope. So it's kind of like a reverse mentality to me anyway. So first focal plane, right? This scope takes really good advantage of the first focal plane feature, and the way it does that is when you're when you're looking at something up close, right? You want different information than if you're looking at something at distance, right? So if I'm looking at distance, I want to see different things. I want different information so I can do my range estimation, my bullet drop compensation, so I can adjust for wind. Okay, when I'm shooting up close, I don't need any of that information. All I need to do is get my dot on target as quickly as possible. And I want these posts out here, right, these outer posts, to drive my eye to the center so I can pick up that reticle that's in the center. Okay, so this scope does that really well. I've seen lots of other first focal plane scopes where they give you good information, when you zoom, when you're shooting at distance, but then when you back it out, right, this basically shrinks down to that, right, so you can barely see that, and then you don't have the posts out here to help drive you to the center. So that's what I want from a first focal plane scope. And the way I kind of see it is the first focal plane, what it does, right, that a second focal plane scope doesn't do. Second focal plane scope gives you all the information, including information that you can't use. All right. First focal plane eliminates the information that you cannot use. Okay. So when I'm looking at something at distance, I want all this information here. I want my bullet drop. I want my wind adjustments. I want my wind, my range estimation measurements. But if I'm looking at something, in CQB distance, I don't want all this information. That's just stuff that I can't use at close distance. I just want to see my dot, and I want something to guide me to the center of that dot. Okay, so this does very, very well. So let's take a look through the scope. So this is made in Japan. The glass rather is made in Japan, which is supposed to be it's supposed to be a superior glass quality. Although I don't think my eyes are good enough to be able to tell the difference. Let's see. So right now we are zoomed out. See if we can get this thing right. Okay, so when we're zoomed up, so you can see how the image kind of goes edge to edge. There's very little of the scope that you will see once you line it up right. So you can see the outer posts, how they kind of guide you to the center. So if I was to make a suggestion to Primary Arms, if I was to make a suggestion, right, what I would like is these lines over here, right, because you see how they get dark out here? They get a little too thin in here, right? So basically I would want these lines up here from the 30 to 50 to be thicker, and then from the 50 to the 100 to be a little thicker. Because when I'm looking through the glass, right, especially if I'm moving through the woods, right, shooting through the woods, my eye basically falls on this area over here. It doesn't really go all the way back here. It's a little too far back. It goes to this area over here, and it would be really helpful if these lines over here were a little bit thicker to guide me to the center. Now, you might say that, hey, if you make those lines thicker, you won't be able to get the fine measurements that you can. Well, here's the thing. Out here, we're already at 30 over here. That's 30 mils over here, right? That's 30 to 50. So if I'm looking at something and I'm measuring 30 mils, I mean, I'm measuring something that's pretty big, like a tractor trailer, okay? So, you know, I don't need to get all the way down to like a quarter mil if I'm all the way out to 30 mils, okay? So, because there's a line, even though you can't see it, there's lines in here that I can use, right, for my fine measurements. So the lines from the 30 to the 50, I think that if those were a little bit thicker, it would have been easier to, to guide me. It would have been a lot more convenient to guide me to the center, so I can find my horseshoe, because you're not going to see the chevron in the center. All you're going to see is the horseshoe. Okay, so that's what I would like. That's the suggestion that I would make to primary arms for improving this. Now, as far as when you're zoomed in, let's see if we can zoom this thing in. Give you guys a better look at this. So first, let me go to 3 power. All right. So when you go to 3 power, and the nice thing about the first focal plane, the measurements hold true at all magnifications. Where are you? All right, you see how it kind of goes edge to edge. Now that's with the illumination off. Put the illumination on. So this is in 3 power. I have found this to be very convenient if you're trying to track, let's say, a moving target at about, let's say, 75 yards or inside of 100 yards, or if you got a runner or something. 3 power is pretty useful at that distance. Get this back. Now, even though this has auto off, which is a great feature, if you keep this on, even with the auto off, you're going to run down your battery pretty quickly. The way I would recommend that you use this is keep it like in a 2 power if you think you're going to be going indoors, because in 2 power you're not going to see it at all in daylight, right? But if you go indoors into a basement and you keep the illumination at 2, you'll be able to see it when you need it. All right, so that's what I would do with this to try and conserve the battery. So right now it's off. Let's go all the way up to 8 power. And you guys can take a look at that. Okay, see if we can line you up right. See if we can put you on target a little bit so you can see at least some targets behind it. All right, so you got an idea what that's going to look like. So let's take a look at some of the features. Now, I did discuss all this in detail in the first video that I did. That was when I had this for about 3 weeks and I was working with it. But I'll quickly go through it. So you got your horseshoe over here. You know, again, that kind of guides you to the center. So this horseshoe is basically what you see here. Although here you just see the horseshoe, whereas here now you can start seeing the thickness and you can see the chevron in the center. Okay. Now, if you've got, let's say, a runner, right, somebody that's running, let's say in that direction, you would line them up with the edge of the horseshoe, and then by the time you pull the trigger, he's basically over here. So at about 100 yards, I would say from let's say 100 to maybe 200 yards, that would work. I mean, obviously it's not going to work at all distances. So in that 100 to 200 yards, if you got a runner here to there, the other thing that you can also do is you can time it. So let's say you got a runner, you can kind of use these lines over here to basically time how many seconds does it take him to go from here to here, right? So, you know, if it takes him, let's say from here to there, if it takes him 2 seconds, 1, 2, then you kind of know what your lead is, right? So presumably you're going to be shooting him at longer distances. So if you know it takes him, or you can even use these lines, right? So if it takes him 2 seconds to go from there to there, you got a 2 second lead or 3 seconds. So that's basically how I would really lead my runners. I would actually count the dots, how long it takes them to go from one spot to the other. But at 100 to 200 yards, you can also use the edge here, right? You get him on the edge, and basically he'll run to the center over there. So, so the other thing is you got your bullet drop here. So what I use a 50-yard zero. So the 50-yard zeros, I'm gonna have first zero. I'm gonna have my 50-200 yard, my 50-200 zero, right? So 50 all the way out to 200 yards. I just put the tip of the chevron on the target, pull the trigger. So at 300 yards, it's usually the top of this post right there. Then that's 400 yards, 500 yards, 600 yards, okay? So what I normally do is I'll get my 50-yard zero, and then when I get out to 300 yards or 400 yards, I'll fine tune it. Because if you're on it, let's say 300 yards, you'll still be accurate at 50 yards. You'll also be accurate at 600 yards. So that's where I like to kind of fine tune at 300 and 400 yards is where I do my fine tuning. Okay, so that'll get you out to 600 yards. Past 600 yards, you're gonna probably have to, you know, it'll get you in the ballpark, but you probably have to, you may have to make an adjustment out at those distances, unless you're specifically using the ammunition that they tell you to use. If you look in the book, I forget what it is offhand, but there's a very specific ammunition. There's actually 2 different types of ammunition that they will tell you to use that will line up perfectly with all these marks all the way out to 800, because, you know, different ammunition, you know, goes at slightly different speeds. So you know, you don't expect the bullet drop on any scope to be completely accurate, you know, to all ammunition in that caliber. So you do have to, you do have to do a little bit of fine tuning and also like develop some data and know exactly what your hold needs to be. But this will get you in the ballpark, especially out to like 500 yards. You know, 500 yards, no problem. If you got a 50-yard zero over here, fine tune it at 300 yards. So anyway, other thing here is we got you got your wind holds, right? So I'll come down here. So basically, that's the first dot is your 5-mile-per-hour wind, 10, 15, 20-mile-per-hour winds. So you got your wind leads over here. So that's also really convenient. Now the wind holds on the 800-yard line over here, they also match up to 1 mil. So this is convenient because if you look in here, this, you know, basically this is kind of like a blank area, right? It doesn't have too much information. The reason why they do that is to just kind of draw your eye to the center and allow you to focus on what you're shooting at. But the issue here is if you're trying to communicate, let's say with a spotter or with somebody else, right? And you got somebody over here, right? You're using your chevron to see them, and you want to communicate to them. Well, it could be a rock. Let's say you put this dot over, you put the tip of the chevron on a rock, and you tell somebody, hey, look 3 mils to the right of that rock. Okay, so you both know what rock you're looking at, but what's 3 mils to the right? Well, I would come down to the 800 line and use that. Okay, that's 3 mils. I would come up, and I could see that 3 mils to the right of my chevron would be right on the edge over here, right? So that's how I would use this 800 line. The wind dots over here correspond to 1 mils, and you can use that accordingly. Okay, so over here you got your range estimation. You can range estimate a man based on his height. So let's say at 300 yards, his feet are going to be here, his head's here, right? At 500 yards, feet here, head here. But then you can also use half the man. So if the guy's sitting down or if he's behind the car, so from the belt to the head, right? I got somebody here at 500 yards, right? Belt to head. So you can range estimate half the man. So this is also a great feature of this reticle, okay? And then of course you got your mils. So these barbells, that's 10 mils. From here to here, that's 10. Right from the center to here, there's a barbell there, that's 10. Then from here to here, that's 10. Okay, and then you can zoom out, because if you need to see a little bit more, you zoom out. Great thing about the first focal plane is that all these measurements hold true as you go further and further out. So that's not a feature of a that's not something that's going to hold true in a second focal plane scope. So as far as range estimating, and I've covered this in another video, the formula is you take the number of inches, multiply it by this conversion factor 27.77 and divide it by the number of mils that you see here. So average man being about 6 foot tall, that's 72 inches, right? All right, so at 200 yards, he's basically going to stand from this barbell to that barbell. Okay, so that's going to be 10 mils that you're going to measure. So that's 72 inches, 72 times 27.77, and you're going to divide that by the 10 mils that you measure. You just pop this on the calculator. Now you might say, who's going to have a calculator? You know, if you're carrying a scope like this, you're going to have a calculator, right? These two things go together. Snipers basically you know, carry calculators. These things are light, they're solar powered, they're cheap. If you have a scope, like this, right, you know, you're gonna have a small pocket calculator as part of your kit. So we said the man is 72 inches times 27.77 divided by, let's use 6.5. So let's say I measure this guy from here to about there. He's 6.5 mils tall. So divide that by 6.5 equals, oops, come on, I hit something wrong there. Okay, let's try it again. So 72 inches times 27.77, okay, divided by, we measure 6.5, okay, basically 307. So basically he's at, a person that measures 6.5 mils tall is going to be at about 300 yards, okay? And at the end, basically you can also do the width of the shoulders. He's going to be basically 2 mils wide. So that's how you use the mil scope. I've done videos on, you know, detailing this with numerous examples. Now the great thing about this is, because you can say, hey, you can use this thing over here to range estimate off the size of a man, but sometimes you don't have a man. Sometimes you have an object like a truck, right? So all tractor trailers are about 75 feet long. So that's something that you can measure, you can either memorize, or you can calculate. So same deal, a tractor trailer 75 feet long is going to measure 900 inches long, right? You just take 75 multiplied by 12. So at 200 yards, it's going to be 125 mils wide, right? So you're going from there to there. Now you only got 100 here, so it's going to be outside of, you know, it's even going to be outside of this, all right? But at 300 yards, right, it's going to be 83 mils wide at 300 yards, right? So 300 yards, it's going to measure from there to about there, okay? So that's how long your tractor trailer is going to be, from there to about there. Okay, so at 400 yards, it's going to be 62 mils. At 500 yards, it'll be 50 mils, right? So at 500 yards, your tractor trailer, right, from there is going to be from there to there, which is where your barbell is, or from there to there. Okay, that's going to be the length of your tractor trailer. You know that you're at 500 yards, so then you know that basically you can come down here 500 yards, boom, that's your bolt drop over here. If you got some wind, like let's say you've got a 10-mile-per-hour wind, boom, you hold on that dot right there. Okay, so this is really good. You can also do the height. So the height of a tractor trailer is 13.5 feet. So the same deal at, let's say at 400 yards, right, the tractor trailer is going to be 11 mils tall, right? So when you measure it, a tractor trailer at 400 yards is going to be from here to there. Okay, that's going to be the height of your tractor trailer. And then again, you know that you're at 400 yards, so then you go, basically you would use that line right there. There's your 400 line. So that's how you use the scope. This is really an excellent tool. But again, there's a lot of information here. That's really great if you're shooting at distance, but if you're shooting up close, you don't need to see all this stuff in your scope. So the great thing is when you zoom out to 1 power, you're not going to see this. You're going to see this, right? So basically you got your crosshairs here to guide you to the center so that you can take your quick shots at closer distances, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about the scope now that we talked. And the reticle is the key feature here. I mean, this scope is all about the reticle. All the other stuff is just kind of like a bonus. So great thing about this, as far as the measurements, right? If you take the cap off. So I got the covered caps over here. These are in mils, okay? Not MOA. So the great thing is that these match up to these lines over here. So if you're shooting, let's say at 100 yards, right, you're on bullseye, and then let's say you measure here that you're whatever, let's say 5 mils off, then you come over here, you know exactly how many mils to adjust. So you can use the scope to measure exactly how many mils off you are from your bullseye, and then just dial that in there and adjust it. And then there's once you get it, and then there's once you get this thing zeroed where you want it, there's an Allen key that you put in here. Then you loosen this up and you turn it, and that's how you get this to be at 0. All right. So, and the great thing is once you're at 0 here, for example, I know if I take out the 5.56 bolt and I put in, let's say, a 22 conversion bolt, with a 22 conversion bolt, I know I gotta dial this up 10 mils, right? And now my 22 is gonna be accurate. So that's one of the great things about being able to adjust this and keep that at 0. If you throw in a conversion bolt, or you could, or let's say even a different grain. Let's say you go from a 77 grain to a 55 grain. That might be, let's say, like a 3 mil adjustment. You can make that, or a 5 mil, whatever that happens to be. I don't know offhand. So you can use this to make adjustments for different calibers. And you can also make adjustments here for the wind. Although for wind, I prefer to use, basically I'll use the reticle. As much as possible, I would rather use the reticle than start fiddling around with the turrets. Okay, that's how this scope was designed, so that you would use the reticle to make your adjustments. Using turns to make your adjustments is basically just a different style. Now they do give you, first of all, here's the box, in case you guys are looking into buying this. There's the box. When you buy this, they do give you a second, they give you an external turret. So if you wanted to, this is just for your elevation, you could basically put your Allen key in here, remove this, put this in place, and now you have an external turret if you wanna, if that's what you want to use. I played around with that for about a month, and then I ended up taking that off and putting the caps back on, because a lot of times I'm basically walking through the woods. The rifle's basically rubbing up against my jacket, and I don't want these things moving as I'm moving around with the rifle slung on my body. So that's why I prefer the caps. And I already mentioned, as far as the illumination, right? The illumination, you're gonna want to use the etch reticle as much as possible, because you're just gonna work. Because even though it has auto off, if you're moving around, right, the gun is always moving, and it's it's basically, it's never going to go to sleep. Now, if you keep it on and you put it in your safe, I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that the electronics of this, as far as the auto off, auto on, are not as far developed as you will typically see on a red dot. So I think that it's going to still consume the battery a little bit when it's in the, even with the auto off, auto on. I don't know for sure. Since I bought this I've had this for 5 months already. I have had to change the battery like 3 times. And I think the last 2 times, basically I just had it off the whole time. And even in the off position, it seems like it ran down the battery a little bit. I'm gonna, I don't know if there's a connection issue with this. I'm gonna do, I put in there a fresh battery. I'm gonna see if it runs down the battery again. And if it does, I'm going to reach out to Primary Arms and see what they see. Because maybe there's a connection issue where, when I flip this off, it doesn't go fully off. I did have that sort of problem with the early red dots, like going back, like whatever, 8 years, 10 years ago. The earlier red dots that had the dial that you would turn, sometimes off wasn't off, or on wasn't completely on. That's why they moved away from the dials. With the dial adjustments for your illumination. So I'm not 100% sure on that. There's always a chance that maybe I just had bad batteries, but that's something I'm keeping an eye on. If you guys out there have the same scope, keep an eye on that. Let me know if the battery runs down, while you just have it off and you just have it in storage. Okay, this way we can kind of build up some data that we can present to Primary Arms. So if they need to fix something, they can fix it. Okay. So, there it is. There's the bikini cover that they give you, pretty nice. So overall, I love the scope. This is a great scope. It is expensive at $1,500. I use these guns basically to train people, and there's not too many. I don't pull this scope out too often to train people. I'll usually use like my SLX scope, which also has, that's a second focal plane, but has a lot of this same information. I'll generally use the cheaper scope for training people. I have to, basically I'll reserve this for, customers that I see maybe on a more frequent basis. But I'll definitely start off people on the cheaper scopes, and I keep this basically for myself and for some people that I really like, to put it blunt. But it's a great scope, very happy with it. And again, it's all about the reticle. This is where it's at. It's a great reticle. It gives you different information when you're up close, right, in one power, that's this over here, gives you different information when you're zoomed when you're zoomed out, which is what you need. So it gives you different information at different distances. Drop some comments below. I hope I didn't miss anything. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you all soon. I'm doing a woods shooting exercise using the Primary Arms PLX M8 scope. Basically, I'm moving tree to tree, shooting at those steel targets. Okay, guys. So, as you can see, it's not too bright now. Sun's starting to set. Excellent scope. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, if when you're using this with the illumination off, okay, if the lines from the 30 mil to the 50 mil was a little bit thicker, I think it would have been a little bit easier to basically get to the center. Because right now when I come up, what happens is the thick outer posts are like way to the edge of my glass, and I really don't even go to that. Okay, I pretty much go to the lines, you know, basically at the 30, where the 30 mils are. I'm using the 30 mil, the posts at the 30 mils to direct me to the center to find my horseshoe, right? And I'm putting the horseshoe on the target, taking the shot. So still a great scope. It's the best one that I've had a chance to try out of all the different variables scopes that I've tried. But yeah, just you know, if I was to make a recommendation for some improvement, it would be there to make those lines between the 30 and the 50 a little bit thicker, so your eye can see it a little bit better. And I don't think it's going to affect your ability to range estimate, because basically if you're range estimating something at 30 mils, somewhere between 30 and 50 mils, it's something big, all right? You're range estimating tractor trailers. You know, you're range estimating, you know, entire trees, 80-foot trees, okay? So you're not range estimating like the height of a man, where there's a big difference between, like, say, a 1/2 mil and a 1/4 mil. So I hope this video was useful, and I hope that Primary Arms and Dimitri over there get a chance to see this video, and hopefully they'll implement some of these suggestions maybe into the next version of this that comes out. But all in all, excellent scope. Absolutely love it. It's my favorite scope to shoot. And like I said earlier, this is a scope that, you know, most of the people that I generally train them on the single single focal plane scope, the second focal plane scope, just because it's a little bit cheaper. It gets beat up. This is a scope I tend to use more for myself or for, a few selected customers that I really like. So thanks for watching. Talk to you all soon.